Welcome to One Bills Lite, your low-calorie version of our daily show, One Bills Live. Coming up, we'll examine if the Bills should compete for free agent J.J. Watt or slow play the process, knowing there will be more veteran releases. Steve will do his best in a Bills Empire State edition of our numbers game, and we'll talk with ESPN NFL insider Chris Mortensen on his breaking news report on the trade of Carson Wentz. Let's get to it.
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve! A balloon. Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Lite as we provide all the Bills and NFL info you need in about 40 minutes. Steve, we've already seen some twists and turns in the J.J. Watt free agent tour. Although he isn't traveling anywhere with COVID restrictions still in place for the NFL, he and his representatives are talking to a lot of teams. On Tuesday, the Titans confirmed they had reached out to the Watt camp. Then Cleveland.com reported that Watt is seriously considering the Cleveland Browns as his next team of choice. Then on Wednesday, ESPN's Kimberly Martin reported that the interest between Watt and the Buffalo Bills is, quote, definitely mutual. So, Steve, is there mutual interest between the two sides? And if there is, how fervently should the Bills pursue this opportunity?
They should pursue it, but let's face it, this is free agency. It's completely 100%, 1,000% up to JJ.
1,000%.
It's up to JJ because he doesn't have to take the best deal. He can pick the team he wants to go to. He doesn't. He made $83 million over his last contract or so. The guy knows where his next meal's coming from. If he wants to go after a championship, he can pick his spot and take whatever he wants to take to play there. The teams, however, they're constrained by a cap who is now saying it's going to be certainly not going to be $175 million, probably above or at $180 million.
Yeah, at least.
At least. So there's going to be some teams that are a little bit more loose with their purse strings than they thought they were going to be. But there are a lot of teams that just have no money to spend right at this point. So that's the only thing that limits JJ's options. But even then, if he wants to, there's a couple of teams that would cut a couple of really good defenders to sign this guy. So yeah, the Bills should pursue him. They will. It's all up to JJ what the deal he's going to command.
And logic would say, at this point in his career, age 32 season coming up here in 2021, that he's looking to win more than he's looking to get paid. I think that's a fair assessment.
Absolutely.
The question is, what kind of, I think he still wants relatively fair market value, so you don't want to insult the guy. But this is kind of a delicate balance you have to strike here between being fiscally responsible, knowing you have other things on your roster that you have to address. But this is a nice upgrade if you can get it at an affordable price.
Yeah, I mean, there is a downside. His age is a downside. The length of the contract you're going to be able to sign with him is a downside. And also the questions about his health. He played all 16 games this last year in 2020. But in the 4 years before that, he only played in half the games and played in 32 of the 64 possible games. That's an issue.
It's a risk.
It's a risk. If JJ is willing to, it depends on what JJ is willing to get, what concessions he's willing to give a club as protection for their risk. Will he take an incentive-laden contract with big numbers possible and small numbers guaranteed, and the length could be agreed upon at something, a 3-year length, a 5-year length, or just a 1 or 2 year deal? It's all up to him is what he's willing to accept. But that's all that's going to be on the table.
I think teams like the Bills and others, even though this restrictive cap, the floor looks like it's going to be $180 million. Even with that restrictive cap, though, this isn't. And I think fans say, well, of course, this is a no-brainer. Go get J.J. Watt. He comes onto the Bills roster. He's the best defensive lineman on the team walking in the door. And that seems all very easy to determine and decide upon. But it's different this offseason because you sign him along with all the other things you have to do. I think it's fair to assume that you either have to, A, release a player, maybe two, on the defensive side of the ball, particularly defensive line, where this team is heavily invested. B, not re-sign maybe one of your current free agents because of the money you could potentially commit to Watt. Or C, be forced to restructure maybe one or two more contracts than you initially anticipated because Watt is now available.
Right.
And you have to weigh, is Watt not only... I think everybody would say Watt is worth adding to your roster. He's an upgrade in probably 20 of the 32-team cases, maybe more.
Yeah.
But all those other things rolled into it is what makes the decision all the more complicated, I think.
Yeah, and the restructuring, the Bills will do that anyway. They're going to restructure a bunch of guys, and nobody has a problem with anybody restructuring. If the player wants if the team wants a guy to restructure, usually they'll make it okay with him to do that. They'll incentivize it for him to do that. Cutting players, and here's the problem. Here's the downside for the teams. They'll release a player for an upgrade. That's the business of the sport. It's not fun, but they got to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. If they pay JJ, that means they can't sign one of their other mid-range free, like a John Feliciano or Darrell Williams.
Could mean that.
Those type of players. Levi Wallace, if they were of a mind to re-sign Levi. Not only could they not re-sign those guys, they couldn't sign a replacement that was even nearly as good as they were. You're gonna be thin at certain spots of your roster because you just don't have the money to pay for a quality player. You're gonna have to take a flyer and hope the guy comes through big
Somebody
time.
on a one-year deal
and those
or
don't
a
usually
draft choice.
Those guys usually don't come through for you, or you're gonna have to depend on guys who are undependable. So while you may have a good defensive lineman rushing the passer in J.J. Watt, the right side of your offensive line may be a mess.
Yeah.
And that is a ripple effect that you got to consider if you're Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott.
It's certainly something that is going to bear watching in the coming days. Who knows? There's no time frame that has been put on this in terms of when Watts wants to reach a decision, but you have to believe it's going to come sooner rather than later, knowing very soon some other big-name players are going to be in the market.
If you can get JJ for, if you come out and you say, hey, this is our ideal spot for JJ, his contract, his spot. Would be our ideal. If he says, yeah, I'll take it, okay, do it. Other than that, you've got to make sure, you got to know there's going to be some there's already some really quality guys going to be out there. So you got to be really ready to say, no, thank you. That's really hard, staring in the face of a guy who's 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL in this decade. That's hard to say no to that, but you got to be ready to do that.
Yeah. That will wrap up our discussion on J.J. Watt for now. We now move to our favorite portion of the show. It's called the numbers game. And Steve, I've been kind of putting the screws to you on some of these with the numbers game. They've been difficult. I haven't been going easy on you. So now, we're in the off season. We're taking a breath here. I decided to take this in a different direction, and I don't think it's too difficult because of the length of the list and what I'm going to ask of you. So by our unofficial count, or actually it's an official count now, I did get this confirmed this morning, there have been 47 professional football players who have played for the Bills.
Throughout history?
Who were born in New York State.
Ooh, okay.
Okay? 47 Bills all time have been born in New York State. And I'm only going to ask you to name 5 of these players. Okay? And I can confirm that I know at least one off the top of my head was one of your former teammates. So I just need you to name 5 of these 47 players. All right? You ready?
I have no shot.
Oh,
at this.
yeah, you do.
I have no shot at this.
I will tell you right
off the bat.
I don't know where
these guys were born.
Well, there's one that I think still lives nearby who was born in the same town that the stadium sits. More modern player than than your guys. But
there's all those guys. The John Cordo.
Boom! You got one right off the bat here. Fire up the music for Steve. Let's get him motivated here.
John Cordo.
That's one.
That's a great one. But they got to be Bills players. So I know
that's
some
right.
Like Jim Burt and Ron Wolfley and
played for the Cardinals and Giants, right? There was one guy who was a former teammate of yours.
Shane Conlon?
Yes, Shane Conlon, Frewsburg, New York.
Right.
John Cordo, Orchard Park. So that's 2 out of 5. See, I kept the number low because I didn't want to kill you.
There's Jim Haslett. Where was he born?
No, Jim Haslett, I don't believe is on this list. No, he's not. Yeah, I think he's a Pennsylvania guy. Mm-hmm. There is one guy who was a Taskers teammate of yours who is on this list. There is another guy who is, I would consider, one of your best friends ever among teammates.
Really?
That is on this list. And he is currently in the league and employed.
Frank Reich.
Frank Reich. Freeport, New York on Long Island, correct?
Stan Gilbaugh.
I don't think Stan. Let me check.
Stan Gilbaugh. He was
no, not Stan
guy.
Gilbaugh. Okay, so that's three. You've got three.
Cordo,
just need two more.
Cordo, Conlon, Reich.
And Frank Reich. There is another former teammate, played the same position as you on offense, and hails from New York State. Another Long Island native.
Ooh, that's okay. That's Al Edwards. Billy Brooks.
So I've given you the position.
Yeah, well,
played with you more towards the end of your career with the Bills, and was
Tony
a receiver.
Klein. Oh, he's a receiver.
Tony Klein's a California dude.
Yeah. Let's see. Gosh, who would it be? Who would it be? A receiver? I'm going down the list.
One of your first. It was the first.
Chris Burkett.
Taskers teammate. The first, not Chris Burkett. Nope.
Wait a minute. First Taskers teammate, Quinn Early.
Quinn Early, correct. That's four.
Quinn Early was born
West
in New York.
Hempstead, New York.
Really?
Went to my high school, actually. So it's the only guy who we have any claim to fame in terms of a pro athlete. You have one more, and I'm going to tell you there is another former teammate of yours that I spotted on this list. Backup running back towards the end of your time with the Bills. Brooklyn native.
Ooh.
Had a very unique first name. Not a. I don't know if you'll get it because, he was only here in, let me see.
Like 97, right?
Hold on, I'm checking. Right? 94, 95, he was here.
Oh, okay.
Appeared in 17 games for the Bills.
Well, I got a chance at this one.
Backup running back, like third stringer.
Like a Nate Turner, or John Jamie Mueller, or a...
Right, but 94, 95.
Derek Holmes.
Yeah, you're in that range there, somewhere in there. I'll give you his initials.
Kenny.
YJ.
Oh gosh, yeah. Hold on.
Yeah, very unique name.
Yarnell Johnson. What is it? Tell me what it is.
Yarnell Jourdain.
That's it. Yarnell Jourdain. That's it. I knew it.
All right, we'll give you 5 on that. All right, good job. That's why I only wanted to give you 5. I was trying to be nice. But I saw former teammates on there, so I was like, all right, he's got a shot. Some interesting names on there. Some really interesting names.
Guys don't really...
Some Wall of Famers on here. Butch Bird.
Oh, sure. Because here's the thing. You get to know these guys. It's about their college, it's about their football career and their families, right? Where they're at, where they're, you don't really go back, like who they're married to at the time, not where their family, where they came from, right?
Yeah.
And you'll talk about where they went to high school or whatever, but even then, they weren't born in that, you know what I mean?
Yep. The other former teammate of yours, Ronnie Harmon.
Oh, yeah.
Queens, New York.
Oh, sure.
Current Bills player, Dean Marlowe from Queens, New York.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I was born in Queens, so it's funny. I kind of talked to Dean about that. I was like, hey, you're my Queens guy. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, I was born in Queens, too. He's like, oh, no kidding. Where? What hospital? We were going through that whole thing. So, yeah, it's an interesting list. And I don't know. If I can find a way to take a picture of this and put it on Twitter, I'll try to do it. Because it's interesting just to kind of see the New York natives that have played for the Bills.
There's more
Naaman
than you
Roosevelt.
Think.
The Buffalo kid. Corey Graham.
Oh, I should have got Naaman.
Yeah, Corey Graham's another guy.
I should have gotten Norton. Yeah,
because Naaman's playing up. He was playing up in the CFL for
Naaman,
a while.
I know Naaman. Yeah. He was. Yeah, he's a good player. Played for the Bills for a minute and has had a tremendous Canadian football career.
Yeah. So second part of the numbers game here, Steve. If you had to guess, could you just give me a guess on the top 2 most popular positions of New York State-born Buffalo Bills? Where do you think most of them, what positions?
Corner.
Top 2 positions for New York State-born Buffalo Bills.
Corner, running back.
Not corner. Not running back.
Wide receiver.
Wide receiver is third.
Oh,
6 wide receivers.
Okay, then I'm going to say linebacker.
No, not linebacker.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm running out of...
Well, here's the thing, Steve. I'm going to tell you, over the history, New York State is not a power state for football products, right?
Right.
So
Gotta have skill.
knowing,
It's like a skill player.
Knowing you don't have a
right?
ton of elite athletes. Most of the elite athletes in New York State, they play basketball.
Yeah.
So
right.
knowing that, I would say don't go towards the skill position.
All right, I'm going to say offensive lineman.
Offensive line is number 2 with 7.
And then I'll say defensive line.
Defensive line,
really?
10.
It's the big guys.
10, yeah. Give me the big hosses, you know.
Well,
Got some people in the middle of the state, you know, farming.
It's the Empire State.
You know, northern tier, doing some farming.
I suppose.
So, yes, the top 2 positions for New York State-born Buffalo Bills, 10 defensive linemen, 7 offensive linemen. So that will conclude this week's edition of The Numbers Game. Wanted to go in a different direction there, but you did all right. Time to talk to our guest this week. It's ESPN NFL insider Chris Mortensen, who broke the story with his colleague Adam Schefter on the trade of Carson Wentz to the Colts. He not only gives us his thoughts on what the trade means for Indianapolis and for the Eagles, but what the rest of the league's quarterback landscape looks like. Mort, thanks for joining us and giving us a little time on what's got to be a busy day for you. Thanks very much.
What happened?
Mort,
No,
it's interesting, Mort, because everybody thought this was going to be a perfect marriage. They felt like if you spin it positively in favor of Carson Wentz, things started to go south for him when Frank Reich left. And when that staff started to get broken up, as we see successful staffs in the NFL do, they got poached. Frank Reich took the job in Indianapolis, and it's never been the same for Carson Wentz. Is it that simple for Carson, or is there more there?
I think that's the foundation of what we're talking about. I know that, listen, Carson played well even after Frank left. It just wasn't at the same level. And I think that Doug Peterson himself missed Frank Reich. I can remember when Josh McDaniels backed out of that Indianapolis coaching deal. I had more than one executive or personnel man, staff member of the Eagles say, "Oh no," when they found out Frank was going to interview because they knew they were going to lose him. And there were a lot of reasons why things went south with Carson in Philadelphia. It wasn't just Doug Peterson, and some of it belonged on Carson, no question about it. But it's also faith with the organization when there's no communication, when they really don't tell you that they're going to bring in another quarterback. You know, people want a heads up. It wasn't that Carson was afraid of competition. He wasn't competing with Jalen Hurts when they drafted Hurts with a second-round pick. It's just a matter of communication. You know, just saying, hey, oh, by the way, we're going to draft this guy for a couple of reasons. And I think that not trust. When you break a trust, here's what I'll say. You guys have been married, or if you're still married. If you break a trust, you got a deep hole to dig out of. And I think that's exactly what happened. But for me, this is a perfect marriage with Indianapolis. I think the Colts and Frank Reich can fix Carson Wentz. And I think Carson can go back to playing Pro Bowl caliber football, which makes the Colts what? A Super Bowl contender, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Yeah, and before we delve into more on that and you know, getting Carson fixed, why don't you just kind of spell out for us how Chicago kind of fell out of the running here? What can you offer us on that? Because it very quickly became apparent that the Eagles only had one potential trade partner in the Colts as it got down to the end of this. So what led to Chicago falling out of it?
Well, I think that there was Chicago felt a little bit of backlash from the public when the Wentz name came up, and everybody thought they'd be getting a Matthew Stafford type trade, which was never going to happen, by the way. That was a unique deal. I think they're just connecting the fact that Jared Goff and Carson Wentz were 1-2 in the same draft, and you know the Lions got 2 first-round picks, but literally the Rams gave the Lions a first-round pick to take Jared Goff's contract off their hands. So that was different, but there was a backlash in the public, so they weren't paying that type of deal, the type of capital. And the other thing is, you know, even though John DeFilippo, who was the quarterback coach for Carson when he's having good years, was there, Carson had some control here. You know, it's like he clearly wanted to go to Indianapolis, and I think the Bears thought it could get difficult if it was them. And why wouldn't you want to go to Indianapolis if you're Carson? As far as I know, Matt Nagy, the coach of the Bears, and the general manager Ryan Pace of the Bears, two guys I like. As far as we know, they got 1 year to prove this thing, and then what happens? And Carson certainly could see the big picture in that, as well as his agent, I'm sure. And bottom line is that the Colts gave him the best offer: 3rd round pick this year, and a 2nd round pick next year that can become a first, depending on play time in 2021.
So how do you think this for Philly plays out? Certainly, they get a draft pick here to this year and next year, but Jalen Hurts obviously is the guy going forward. Are they feeling better about themselves, or they fired their head coach, lost their franchise quarterback that they just signed to an extension?
Looks like a teardown to me.
What's their take on all this?
Well, nobody wanted to believe Jeffrey Lurie, or I'd even say my own reporting when I said that Doug Peterson was in jeopardy, was not necessarily anchored to Carson Wentz, and that's proven to be true. They're looking at more of a long term. I think that after they won the Super Bowl, in fact, I know after they won the Super Bowl, they tried to, let's see if we can catch some magic in a bottle here. Let's keep Alshon Jeffrey. Let's bring in Deshaun Jackson. Let's keep an older, injured Jason Peters. And you saw the offensive line fall apart. To get to the Jalen Hurts part, he's not going to be anointed the starter. No matter what you hear, he certainly is the only guy there but there's a draft coming up. I think they'll draft one, or they'll try and acquire another one to create a competition there. Nick Sirianni, who, as you know, came off Frank Reich's staff in Indianapolis, him and his staff, they wanted Carson Wentz to be part of this. But it was probably had been framed as a competition. So that was what was unique about it, because when they hired Sirianni, everybody said, what? Oh, they're doing this for Carson Wentz. Well, as it turns out, they have a long-range view of how they're going to rebuild this roster. And we'll see. I don't think it'll sit well with Philadelphia fans, but that's why they're Philadelphia.
Yeah. Talking with ESPN NFL insider Chris Mortensen, one of the two men who broke the story on the Carson Wentz trade today. And Mort, if you look at what needs fixing with Wentz's game, obviously there were a lot of circumstances that surrounded his precipitous drop-off in terms of his play in 2020. Obviously, he had injuries at the receiver positions, injuries at the offensive line positions for the Eagles, and then it looked like he was just a byproduct of trying to do too much to try to make up for some of those deficiencies. So what in the eyes of maybe some of the people you've talked to, needs fixing in Wentz's game? Is it his internal clock? I mean, maybe just if you've gotten any insight on that in terms of what sits at the top of the to-do list for fixing him.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the word eyes, because I've always said this, and I covered Major League Baseball for a long time. I'm a dinosaur now. I've covered NFL for a long time, but the one thing I know is that when a former pitcher sees a pitcher have some mechanics issues, he can see it. And I'll say that for a good quarterback coach who's played the position or understands the fundamentals of the position, they can see it. What I've been told in Carson Wentz's case by about 3 people I believe are strong former quarterbacks, understand it, saying he's in dire need of fundamental, going back to the basics, fundamentally, whether it's the base, it's his arm slot, all those things that the nuances of the mechanics of the quarterback. You got to fix that first. And then, by the way, if you are getting constantly hit, and maybe because you also have receivers who aren't in the right spot at the right time, and you're holding onto the ball too long, it affects you. It's clearly affected Carson Wentz. And you could say, is that a weakness? I don't know. I mean, if I put any quarterback up there who's getting hit and rushed too much, all of a sudden they're not all world. So, but fundamentals was the one thing I know. Nick Sirianni told the Eagles that he needs more fundamental oversight. We can fix that. I certainly know that Frank Reich feels the same way. I know some neutral bystanders who also believe that that's really it.
So as you look around the league, I mean, this was the Matt Stafford trade, which obviously still has to be finalized when things roll around.
Right.
This Carson Wentz trade now that we've seen, what's the next domino to fall in this quarterback offseason?
Well, we already got a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger stuff yesterday, didn't we? Huh?
That's coming up after you're off of show. We're going to talk. We're talking to Aditi after this. So yeah.
So we anticipate Drew Brees retiring any day now. So that probably means Jameis Winston. I don't know that it means Jameis Winston there. We certainly Sam Darnold is to me the most fascinating one because new coaching staff. Sam's only 23 years old. His team around him wasn't very good. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league, but they're sitting there saying we're going into his fourth year of his contract this coming season, and we're going to have to make a big financial decision. We hope we're never at number 2 again, and we really like these quarterbacks, and I think it's Zach Wilson at BYU. So you want to restart the clock with Zach Wilson and trade Sam Darnold. Where would that be? Well, I would say San Francisco would be a spot for Sam. And that would send Jimmy Garoppolo. Who knows? Maybe it sends him back up to New England. And where does that lead Deshaun Watson? Or is it just Jimmy Garoppolo to Houston in a dramatic last-minute Deshaun Watson trade? There's a lot going on. I mean, I will turn out the lights at night occasionally, but I know that Adam Schefter will not, and he's younger than I am. But it's going to be an interesting time, and we haven't even talked about Denver. So. I think that Drew Brees' retirement is coming, and I think that Sam Darnold, the Jets, just have to measure the value they get for the second pick overall versus the value they get for Sam Darnold, and do they go ahead and restart the clock from there so they can build that roster up?
Yeah, and you touched on Denver, Mort, and they seem to be a player for Watson, or at least someone that Watson would strongly consider, because I know he has some say in the matter. But is the Watson situation one that you think is going to be the long game, if you will, because this just looks like a staring contest more than anything right now between the Texans organization and Watson?
Yeah, that's the way I read it. Watch me be proven wrong, but that's okay. By the way, I shouldn't, since you guys are in the AFC East, I can't ignore the Miami Dolphins as being part of this picture with Deshaun Watson, because that is a preferred destination for him. And you always don't get what you want, and we know that the Dolphins have said we're committed to Tua. What else are they going to say? They don't know if anything's going to come down with Deshaun Watson. The AFC, by the way, with Wentz to Indy, and I think Phillip Rivers had a really good year for them. That's a good roster. AFC, it's not getting any weaker. It's getting better. So I'm sure everybody in the Bills organization is hoping Deshaun Watson, if he gets traded, it's to an NFC team, somebody like the 49ers or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where everybody sits. There's also the big question mark, you brought it up, is New England. I would think they're going to do almost exactly what they did a year ago, hopefully with better results. They're going to wait until somebody's desperate to sign and get a guy like Cam Newton, who was a former MVP within the last 6 years, and see if they can get something out of him. They'll probably kind of hang out, wait in the weeds, and see which is the last apple to fall off the tree and grab it.
That's what it appears to be, but I think maybe they have a little more urgency this time. We were told 6 weeks ago, Cam Newton's still not totally out of the picture there, but let's see if they try and draft one. Or trade. I just mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. We know that he's certainly got a connection there. What happens to Jacoby Brissett, who's really well respected? Who's been in New England, but I don't necessarily see the Patriots saying, okay, Jacoby's the guy. And we're not even talking about the Carolina Panthers with Teddy Bridgewater, because we know they are going to be aggressive in this market, as well as with Deshaun Watson and some of these other guys. So this is almost like the old baseball hot stove league. This is going to be pretty incredible. I really do. And like I say, we're on a Bills format here program. And I think it's the Bills are watching closely because, they've got some roster things to do. And every other trade that happens, I think, affects them in terms of the competitive edge as we go into the 2021 season.
So Mort, real quick, and this is the last one for me, how apt do you think the Broncos organization is to try to upgrade from Drew Lock there in Denver? I mean, are they hard up to get a change, much like Chicago seems to be? Or where would you put their level of interest in upgrading their quarterback situation? Obviously, they got to play in a division where they got to play Mahomes twice a year, so maybe they are in a sense of urgency, but I'm just curious what the temperature of the room is there in terms of upgrading that position.
Yeah, it's interesting. In December, I really thought that the feedback I got from there, they liked Drew Lock.
Yeah.
And they obviously offered him got Matthew Stafford sweepstakes. But listen, Matthew Stafford, I guess some people don't agree with this. He's a special quarterback. He's a special guy. So there's not another Matthew Stafford out there unless you're going to sell everything to get Deshaun Watson. That's in my opinion. So I don't know that they are going to dump Drew Lock just for anybody or just to upgrade it slightly. I think that they feel like they would have to hit a grand slam with Deshaun Watson or somebody like that to justify giving up on Drew Lock, who has shown promise there, who is athletic, who has an arm, and is somebody you can certainly build with.
Mort, I know it's an incredibly busy day. Thanks for taking some time out. And this story is, it's pretty intriguing because I personally have a friend in Frank Reich who I know is going to give him his best effort to try and fix a guy like Carson Wentz. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy day on a day like this when stuff's coming down to spend it with us.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I know this much. I'm happy for Frank Reich. I'm happy for Carson Wentz. I'm happy for Chris Ballard, the general manager there.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Mort. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mort.
All right, we conclude this week's episode of One Bills Lite by ranking the position holes that will exist on Buffalo's roster based on their free agents, potential cap casualties. Steve, we're going to rank the difficulty in filling those possible holes for Buffalo's roster this offseason in order of easiest to hardest. We'll go with a total of 4 position holes on the roster. Let's identify what we believe will be the biggest position holes heading into free agency. Okay, so let's put this list together, if you will. I think based on the free agents alone, we're looking at offensive line number 1, right?
Absolutely.
You got Darrell Williams, John Feliciano, Ike Butker's a restricted free agent, Brian Winters also on that list.
Ty
Nsekhe. So that alone, I think, puts that at the top of the list.
Yeah, because those guys are all contributors. Ty Nsekhe was a guy that Nsekhe came in during games, and he'd give you high-level tackle play as a swing tackle, as a backup in spot duty. He was always active on game day, so that's a role you've got to find somebody for. And, of course, Ike Butker, Brian Winters played significant amounts of snaps at stretches during the season, and Feliciano, you can credit him. Everybody will tell you, and you can see it with your own eye, everything's different when he's in the lineup.
There's an edge.
He's a difference maker. And Darrell Williams quietly
unsung hero, right?
Had a fantastic year at right tackle. So Feliciano and Williams should be jobs 1 and 2.
Pretty critical.
They're critical to get those guys either re-signed or replaced by guys who are – and you're going to have to find some really good players to do that if you're going to go out on the free agent market. It's going to be hard to do. And so I would think those guys and their contributions, even Ike Butker played significant steps, was a starter in the playoffs. So
yeah,
it was you got a lot of work to do on the offensive line, and I think it's almost to a point where you have to push everything aside before to get that done before anything else.
When Brandon Beane says our front 4 needs to be better, and it's echoed by Coach McDermott, does that say to you defensive end specifically, or do you think it could potentially mean defensive tackle? Because they've talked about getting to the passer more, but the run defense also was not up to snuff either. It ranked 20th in the league this year.
Well, I think it all boils down to, like I always say, it's the guys closest to the ball are the most important, and they have the biggest ripple effect. I think they missed Starlo Tulele and another big body down inside. I think those guys being able to anchor and hold the line of scrimmage in the run game sets you up for more third and long possibilities, which means, and the longer those possibilities are, the percentages just go down that you're not going to get them. Your defense gets off the field a lot more often,
right? Because
you got 2 guys, not because they rush the passer, but because they force a third and long more often in the run game.
And that's more of what this defense did in each of the last 2 years.
Right.
Like they kind of held the fort and created long down and distance situations on third down.
And you got to do that. And that's, I think you can say, yeah, the pass rush would be great because on critical downs, the pass rush couldn't get there because it was 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, not 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9.
So in your eyes, there's 2 ways to skin this cat. You can either get bulkier in the middle, which they may see already happening with Star Lotulelei coming back.
Right.
Or do you get a high-end pass rusher and then shuffle some people out to pay for that pass rusher?
Yeah, it depends.
That's the other way.
It may be the situation where the market out there on the free agent market might say, listen, we can release some guys, and the guys who we would be in other years would be kind of forced to sign might be much higher quality because there's going to be so many of them out there. We might be able to replace
more supply
guys.
than demand. Yeah.
The cheap guys this year may be a step or two above where they would normally be because the market is so flooded with quality people. So we may be able to find guys to replace the second-tier defensive lineman we're talking about if we do sign a shiny new toy like a J.J. Watt with a lot of incentives or whatever. But we may be able to get guys to fill in, depending on who you want to replace, fill in for those guys at a higher level than we would normally do because of the market. That's pretty specific market analysis to run, and I haven't done that. But I would think, and generally speaking, that would be the case. So, but I think you start with what is really going to help you the most, and I think that's down inside, getting some bodies in there to hold the line of scrimmage and win the line of scrimmage every down.
I just wonder if they think they have that already in Star and may not feel like they need to add any more. Or if they do, it's probably a draft choice at best, which they've done already. I mean, Harrison Phillips was a draft choice. Ed Oliver, as we know, was a draft choice for down inside. Whether they go to that well again in what is said, at least on the surface, to be not a great year for defensive tackles. There are some, but it's not in plentiful supply. So you wonder if they just say, let's just ride Star out this year and hope we have what we need and address the edges maybe more. And then the other positions, it's strange to think that the areas are on the defensive side of the ball primarily this offseason for this Bills team, but I think they are. Linebacker and corner are probably the other two where you're looking for a proven number 2 guy to play opposite Tre'Davious White after what has been a revolving door at that position. I mean, it's been mostly Levi Wallace, but there have been other guys on one-year deals rolling through. Do they go that route again, or do they invest in the draft at corner? And then at linebacker, have you resigned yourself to be unable to re-sign Matt Milano? And if so, what path do you choose there to fill that position? Is it free agency or is it draft?
Yeah.
Or is it trade? Probably not trade, but...
I think they'll probably lose Levi Wallace, which backs him into a corner because they've been trying to replace him for 3 years and haven't been able to do it. Levi Wallace will draw some attention out there.
Restricted free agent.
As a restricted free agent. He'll draw some attention. Now, the Bills may say, okay, you know what? You've played hard for us. You've done everything we've asked you for. You get a restricted free agent offer or whatever. You know, we'll match it or what have you. And he may stay. But I don't think there's any question that's a spot where they feel they've got to get better at. And it's probably the easiest spot to get better. There's a lot of athletes out there, a lot of corners that are going to be out there. You'll be able to find a bunch of guys to compete for that spot and ostensibly upgrade. And that's easier to do than finding a guy like J.J. Watt, right? Or signing a guy like J.J. Watt.
I do think they want to bring in more competition to compete with the likes of Dane Jackson, who I think they think a lot of, but I don't know if they're quite sold on him being starting caliber in just his second season after limited snaps as a rookie.
Right. Now, he flashed.
He flashed.
But he's undersized. And that may be a problem for his durability out there trying to make tackle. He's a willing tackler and an aggressive tackler. He brings a lot to the table. If the guy was 2 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier, he would have been playing, I think, all year.
Well, that's why I'm intrigued to see what kind of an off-season program he can get in, if he can add some lean muscle mass.
Yeah, because he did a lot of really good things, I thought, on the field. They're bringing him back, obviously. Yeah, I think it's just – I think that, though, second corner, I think, is probably the most glaring spot where they think, we've got to do something. Yeah. Now, J.J. Watt, if he comes and passes by and picks Cleveland or picks Tennessee or you pick the other team, you're still going to be able to go into the season this year thinking, okay, we're going to be all right with that. We're going to be all right.
Last part of this, what do you think is going to prove to be the hardest one to fill? Is it O-line because of the numbers that you have to address there? Or is it DN because of the price tag? Or is it linebacker because it's hard to replace Matt Milano? Or is it second corner because of what these teams are throwing out on the field in terms of receiver formations every single week?
I think it's offensive line. You got so many guys that are – I mean, think about that room. It's going to – if you had 8 guys on a game day that are in the room ready to go, 4 of them are maybe gone.
Yeah, half. That's half of them.
You got Morris, Ford,
Dawkins, and then Bates, who's still under contract. I mean, there you go.
Everybody's gone. You got to, and that's
a lot.
And cohesion is always a buzzword around the offensive line. They got a long way to go on their offensive line this offseason, and it's going to be I think that's job one.
That is job one. I would agree, and it's not going to be easy to fill due to the numbers you
Don't
have
get
to
distracted by
JJ.
Don't get distracted by JJ Watt.
Don't get it twisted.
You got to get your offensive line straight.
Yeah, amen to that. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of One Bills Lite. Thanks for listening on all your favorite podcast platforms and watching and listening on YouTube on the Buffalo Bills channel. Remember to subscribe so you know when the next episode drops. And remember, when there isn't enough time for One Bills Live, there's always enough time for One Bills Lite. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll see you next week, everybody.